Welcome! Let's talk about sexuality for a bit from a tantric lens. Not that I want to perpetuate any misconception that Tantra is all about sex, although in a very deep sense it kind of actually is. Just not the way we usually think about sex and sexuality. To really understand the deep concepts of Tantra, there has to be a certain level of ripeness, of refinement in our consciousness. Because if we don't have that ripeness, then we cannot perceive subtler truths. So instead, our conditioning will have us perceive from a lens of pain, from a lens of resistance, often without us even noticing, right? And we must be deeply aware of that resistance, where it comes from, and whether it's really based in truth or not. I'll be more specific. When we talk about sex normally, it is veiled in so many layers of historical and cultural shame, guilt, resentment, violation, and pain. And all of this happens whenever we repress something deeply. We have all grown up in a society where sexuality is something to be hushed down and hidden away, and where the body is somehow shameful, and where our separation from the animals is judged by our self-restraint and our manners. And this, of course, has been going on for thousands of years. So being born on Earth, it is in our DNA. It's almost inescapable. And so if we really want to deeply understand the concepts of Tantra, then we have a lot of work to do, a lot of work to deconstruct this whole notion of the body and sexuality being somehow wrong. And we must do this preliminary work because the principles of Tantra are subtle, okay? If there is any shame in the way, if there is any fear, if there is any guilt, then we cannot have these experiences of these subtle truths for ourselves. So this kind of ripeness that I talked about emerges from working through our fears, from seeing through our illusions, but there are other factors as well. So one is to learn through some steady practice to work with the different currents in our being. So our mind, the current of our energies and emotions, and our body, learn to harmonize that all. And another factor is to learn through detachment to form. And with this, I'm not saying denial of form, I'm not saying dissociation, which is another form of attachment. And finally, this ripeness also emerges through surrender to a greater intelligence that we may call by many names. So the deeper your ability to surrender in sincere devotion, the more will be revealed to you. This is something that every saint, every yogi has found. And similarly, when it comes to the fundamental principles of Tantra, it rests upon, it roots in the deepest meditative surrender. So what is Tantra all about? What is that fundamental principle? Well, let's begin with this apparent polarity between matter and spirit, between this material cosmos and all-encompassing awareness. Then Tantra is the system, it is the art of ascending consciousness until we can experience that pure awareness as human beings, uniting the two. It really is a full opening up. It is releasing all resistance to letting that all-encompassing awareness fill you up. So you, the soul, are still you, the soul, but you remember it. You remember what it is to be this fractal of the whole, and you remember your relationship to that whole that is, and that is beyond form. So reaching this state is a rare occurrence, not necessarily because it is difficult to attain the state itself. Yogis say that theoretically, with the help of a guru, you can experience it within a matter of seconds, and the instant result is blissfulness. So you would be sitting, walking, talking, and being immersed in this constant sea of bliss. However, it doesn't just happen. Firstly, because our consciousness is not quite that ready to surrender that fully yet. And even if we feel that our consciousness is ready to surrender, there are almost always still physiological and psychological barriers in the way. So the nervous system is not prepared for this very powerful experience, and the mind is not prepared to deal with and work with these intense energies. Just imagine if your mind is leaning towards worry or resentment, and then you have that amplified 100 times, 1,000 times. That's not a very pleasant state to be in, right? So even if you have your Kundalini awakening started, it can take a decade, it can take more, just to purify your mind to get ready for that 1 second of full awakening where you are established in complete blissfulness. So purification here does not mean that something is somehow bad and should be thrown away, although that is often how it starts, and that's okay too. But what it really means is to be able to deeply and truly accept, and with that full acceptance be able to transcend, so that you can be in the world, fully in the world, but not of the world, right? And I mean to accept so deeply that there is no need for the nervous system to activate anymore from these polarities of life. So for example, you can experience something that would in the past have caused you a lot of anger, a lot of fear, and now you have such a deep acceptance within yourself that you don't really feel swayed anymore. You don't feel that your body gets triggered anymore. You don't feel that your mind gets triggered. Instead, actually, it evokes these feelings of compassion, of love, of gratitude, maybe for your journey and for what you've learned and what you can provide for them. Then that is a sign that you're truly open and ready for this kind of experience. So I say this often because it's so important. Anger, hate, fear, jealousy, passion, sexual desire, joy, none of it is really good or bad. Your body is a part of nature and it is designed to feel all those feelings. And while you are healing, you will feel them all. You can't escape it, especially if you're reaching for some kind of inner union. Then there is no way to do that without feeling and learning to accept every single one of these feelings. And that doesn't mean that you are these feelings. So remember that these feelings don't define you. Your awareness, your soul is untouched, and you can choose to lean more towards that which is untouched within you, and to remember that perspective that can help your healing as you're also feeling all the feelings fully. And I want to clarify this: as human beings, we want to feel, we need to feel. Life is completely lackluster if we don't feel. And Tantra also encourages this, to immerse ourselves in our experience completely, without hesitation, in all the sensations and in all the feelings. However, without attaching to being those feelings. So the catch is the attachment that we have to them. So let's say you have an extraordinary, beautiful experience. How do you feel once that experience is over? If you feel lack, if you feel sadness because that experience is now gone, it means that there is some attachment to the wonderfulness of that experience. And it means that, and we all do this, of course, you live a life of comparison between this moment and that moment. And this moment is more worthy of living than that moment. So this evaluating and comparing your moments is, from what I can see, the subtlemost expression of comparison that will now ripple outwards. So now you begin to compare this moment with other moments that have been or that could be, or in other places with other people, and soon you will begin to compare yourself with other people. And you begin to grasp and wish for things to be different. And even if things feel perfect in that one perfect moment, now you're attaching to that and wanting that to stay forever. And this is the origin of suffering. If instead you could be truly and deeply content with every moment as it is, then there would be no need to compare. There would be no need to grasp for another moment different from this one. And you could then truly live moment to moment, not resisting anything and not pushing towards or grasping for anything. So how does all this relate to sex? Well, one of the things we learn with deep surrender is that everything we experience as human beings exists first as a state of consciousness before it manifests into form. And if we can truly deeply understand this, and also master the art of flowing from moment to moment without resistance, then we can also experience sexuality in a way that is not tied to form. Of course, as you're learning this art, it will still be an experience in and of the body. How else would you know what's going on? So for tantrikas, the body is really the most important vehicle, the most important tool for consciousness evolution, because if something is happening in the body, then that's something you can somewhat understand. If I feel it in my body, then I can grasp that something is also happening in my consciousness. But if we keep refining the art and if we keep surrendering to the present moment, then automatically we develop this ability to experience subtler states. So firstly, the physical experience of form transforms into an experience of energy, which in Tantra is really just a subtler expression of form, right? And then we begin to see that sexuality in its purest state is really just a state of consciousness. And so we can experience the self as being so absorbed in this state of consciousness that the sense of I disappears, that there is no thought, no desire. It is just only that state of consciousness. And I have experienced this in meditation. So it begins in the body with the qualities that we usually associate with sexuality in the body. But when we don't focus on that so much in the body, or we don't focus on gratification, but only witnessing what is taking place, then the experience transforms on its own and it becomes this witnessing of this pure state of consciousness. And the more deeply we go into that, the more the I disappears and it's just being completely feeling like you are this state of consciousness. And so really what this is an early stage of samadhi. And I want to add a reminder that even if we feel, because we're so immersed, so absorbed in the state of consciousness, we feel we are that state of consciousness, it's not technically true, not from a yogic standpoint anyway. So what's happening is that it's our awareness observing the state of consciousness, and we are that awareness, right? So it's only when we are established in that awareness itself and we're meditating on that awareness itself and become absorbed in that, that is the purest state of samadhi, right? And while this is a preliminary step and not the deepest transcendental aspect, it still is a huge step on the consciousness evolution ladder, because when we have this experience, it completely transforms our relationship to sex and to sexuality. So we begin to see how it really is the first step on a ladder to complete consciousness transformation. We begin to see that sex is at the origin of our energy, of what we are. And when we so fully and deeply accept that, accept what it is, that we can become completely non-attached to it, then that is what transforms our consciousness into the experience of inner union. So sex is the catalyst to that experience. As within, so without, as above, so below. You could say that this is a tantric principle. And just like sexual intimacy can be the deepest aspect of intimacy for human beings, given that we're healed emotionally and physically around it, and that we're open and attuned and aware around it, in the same way, sexuality can present the deepest possibility of intimacy with Source. So in devotional surrender, sexuality is our most powerful bridge. It is a pure and beautiful way of learning to connect with Source. And when the powerful energy of human sexuality is directed towards transcendence, then it can massively supercharge our evolution of consciousness. So in the most esoteric, transcendental experience, tantrikas hold that this continual recreation of the cosmos that we're seeing really is a continual expression of sexual ecstasy, and we can tap into that with our deepest transcendence, with complete devotional surrender into source. So this bliss that the yogis are talking about, this final bliss, you know, when the Kundalini reaches the crown, what that really is this tuning in with full devotion into what is already taking place in the cosmos. And that tuning in can only happen when we become so empty of a self that this whole cosmic experience can take place within us. So this eternal cosmic mating between consciousness and matter is really the source, the origin of ecstasy that we can access through the deepest and most intimate love in our heart and in our being. And again, what holds us back from this experience is our identity attachments, our fears, and in particular, our attachments to sexuality, our relationship to sexuality, what we make it mean. If you want to learn more, then join one of my workshops or the Infinite Love Immersion starting this fall, including Kundalini activation. And if you have any questions, if you have any insights, any comments, please share them below. I am so grateful for you joining me today. I wish you a beautiful day and week, and I hope to see you next time. Namaste.